Hello, good morning. My name is Jose Ruizalba. I am professor of marketing at the University of Westminster. Today is 13th of December 2023, and I'm happy to introduce you to Larissa Becker. She has agreed to join us in this research group. She is an assistant professor in marketing at Hanken Business School in Helsinki, Finland. Larissa research is focused on service research, so it fits very well with our research group, and mainly from the customer perspective. She's also interested in customer experience, customer journey, and a theme that I also find very interesting is customer experience management, of course, in the service dominant logic as well, and practice theory. We have recently a presentation by Per Skalling about practice theory. She has received Larissa important awards for research with the 2021 CERSIC Best Paper Dissertation Award. Congratulations, Larissa. And also a paper award in the Quiz 16. Your research has been published in top journals such as Journal of the Academy of Marketing Science, Journal of Business Research, Journal of Service Management. So what we are planning to do now is the topic is customer journey partitioning. As I said, you can give a presentation 20-25 minutes, half an hour, and then Q&A in a friendly conversation. So Larissa, whenever you want, you want also to share screen, please feel free.
Yeah, so thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here. I'm always happy to talk about customer experience. So this is really nice. Yeah, so you already introduced myself. I started working here at Hanken in Finland in March, but I am Brazilian who has been living in Finland since 2016, I think. So for a little while now. Yeah, and since my doctoral studies, I've been very interested in customer experience. This has been my main research interest so far, even though I do research a little bit, for example, with practice theory as well. But today, I'm going to talk about customer journey partitioning. Let me just share. Can you see my slides?
Yes, we can see your slide. Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so this research is now in review in a journal, and I've been working with Bernd Reitsamer from University of Innsbruck in Austria. And I invited him to be here, but he had a commitment already. And this title is Customer Journey Partitioning, and we want to provide a more customer-centric conceptualization of how customers partition or segment or divide the customer journey. So usually the customer journey is a process that extends over time. So we have stages: pre-purchase, purchase, post-purchase, pre-service encounter, core service encounter. So it's something that goes throughout time. It's not one point specific in time. In what happens in customer experience literature is that customer experience researchers, myself included, we tend to divide this customer journey in these stages or divide to touch points. And it's a little bit arbitrary because this is something that how we see it, we divide. But how do customers perceive this? How is the customer divided or segmented from their perspective? And that's what interests this research. And why is this important if you already have, for example, stages and things like this? So we argue that understanding how these customers divide and perceive these segments or divisions in the customer journey is important for mainly two reasons. The first is that the literature that talks about this perception and how people divide process, this literature has shown that depending on how individuals do that, this structures their memory. So it is implicit that depending on how customers divide the customer journey, this will influence how they remember their customer experiences at a later stage in time. And the second reason why we believe this is important is that managers and practitioners, they can do something about it. They can actively influence this customer journey partitioning. So that then it comes the part of customer experience management. So customer experience managers can design the customer journey in a way that indirectly influences how customers will remember their experiences. So given this relevance, the purpose of this paper is to conceptualize customer journey partitioning and its influence on the remembered experience. And I'll go back to the remember experience, which it's a label that we are trying to work on this article as well. But we divide this in 3 questions. The first one, how do customers partition their journeys? So how does this process happen from the customer's perspective? The second one, how then this customer journey partitioning influence how customers remember their experiences? And then the third one, in an effort to provide these more specific managerial implications, we ask how can organizations use this customer journey partitioning in their customer journey design to influence the remembered experience in a positive way. I don't know if you have any questions. You can also interrupt me during the presentation.
Thank you. And if anyone wants to make a question, just instead of using the chat, I would suggest just you don't need to raise your hand. Just use the microphone and make a question like in a real life experience in the room.
Yeah, because I cannot see the chat. Yeah, but then how we plan then to achieve this goal? This is a conceptual article, and we are using this theory adaptation approach. So basically, we have this customer experience domain that we want to contribute to customer experience literature. And to do that, we are relying in these other theories, we are borrowing from them. One of these fields is this event segmentation. So there is event segmentation theory and other psychological perspectives. So basically, this is a field that tries to understand how individuals divide this long process into events, how they segment events, process into events. And they talk a little bit as well how this then influences memory and so on. And the second method theory is experienced utility. You might be familiar with Kahneman, maybe some Arialis studies that basically they are concerned on how the experiences that we have during a process become remembered. So what factors of this continuous lived experience influence how we later remember them? So for example, they have studies about individuals putting hand on ice cold water, and then if they warm water a little bit in the end, then these influences, they remember more positively than it has been lived. So you might be familiar also with peak end rule, that a peak of experience and the end of experience, they influence how people remember it. So this field of literature deal with topics like that. And here we are borrowing from them also to divide between lived experience, that is the lived responses and reactions that customers have during the customer journey, and what we are calling remembered experience, that we argue there is a difference. Since we do not remember experience exactly as they happened, they are not equal, they are different. So we use these theories then to develop this concept of customer journey partitioning, and by doing that, we aim to extend the customer experience literature. So basically, this is our conceptual approach for this article. Then I'm going to present now our findings of our conceptual article based on those 3 research questions. So the first one was, how do customers partition their journeys? And this is largely borrowed from this event segmentation theory that they basically describes this perceptual process that individuals divide this extended process into events. So this is something that everyone does. It's kind of a normal, spontaneous part of perception. It's not necessarily conscious, but while we are undergoing process, we are already segmenting. Okay, something here ended, and then something new begins. And there is this theory, I'm not going to go through into detail, but explains how this process happens. So it's really cognitive. So our first premise, we borrow from that literature to define then customer journey partitioning as the perceptual process through which customers divide the customer journey into events. So this is like a premise because it's like a definition that we want to present. We are not talking yet about relationships between concepts. And then trying to understand, okay, but how does customer journey partitioning happens? So this event segmentation theory, they basically say that customers will perceive an event boundary or something has ended and another something is beginning when there are some distinctive changes. It could be in the environment, in their own goals, or if you talk about the customer journey, a change in the interaction of employee, or a service failure that is going to interrupt something and another something will begin. So basically this has something to do with prediction, that things are going fine and then something happens that indicates, okay, this ended, this something new begins. I cannot predict what's happening anymore. So for example, usually in research seminars and presentations like this, there is a presentation and then there is a final slide saying thank you, final words. You're probably going to perceive an event boundary. Now something new is going to happen. That's probably this more interactive Q&A question. So that's just an example. And the more changes happen, the more individuals are likely to experience an event boundary or perceive one. So our first proposition is that customers perceive event boundaries when they encounter distinctive changes in the customer journey. And another thing about how customers perceive these event boundaries, you might be asking, okay, but what is like the size of an event or the temporal duration and things like this? From this theory, they assume that individuals simultaneously divide events in a hierarchy. So you can think this of a research seminar or a research seminar divided between the presentation and the Q&A section, or the Q&A section can further divide that into every question and answer, and so on. So simultaneously, we have this hierarchical organization of events, that a large event can be subdivided into smaller ones. And from that, then we propose that customer partition events across, between, and even within touch points throughout the customer journey. So even if you consider a single touch point, it's very likely that customers are still dividing it into smaller events. So questions so far?
There was a question in the chat from Matthew, but I don't know, Matthew, you would like to do it now, or maybe in the Q&A?
It's appearing on the slide here, so I might ask it now. The label that you're trying to push, I think you said, Professor, that it was a remembered experience, and I recall reading from Decay. I'm not sure if I've got the pronunciation right here, but Decay's working paper that he separates moment-to-moment experiences and recalled experiences. And I was just wondering why you, I suppose, are pushing this what seems like a very similar word, remembered, rather than an existing concept out there called recalled experience. And that's kind of like the marketing. One of the marketing problems I feel is like this concept proliferation. So I was wondering if there was a specific reason why you've chosen a new label over using something that's already out there.
Yeah, by the way you describe it is indeed a similar concept. And I was not so familiar with this specific label, but then lived and remembered experience. In this case, it came from experienced utility literature that they talk about. I don't remember if it's live utility, I don't think, but remembered utility for sure they use. So this came from that literature, but I'm going to check. Is the 2015 paper?
Yeah, the 2015 working paper, I think that sounds right. That's from my memory anyways. But I suppose if it's a theory adaptation and the phrase remembered experience comes from that literature, which it predates 2015, then that justifies the use. I just wasn't sure if there was a civic consideration or
it's something that maybe we missed, but the way you describe it's very same thing. Yes, thank you. Yeah, so then moving on.
Thank you. Just one comment. Thank you for your presentation so far. I also see that conceptualization of remembered experience with a memorable experience. So have you considered that angle? Because from that literature, even it is getting actually overlapping a little bit on memorable experience and remembered experience itself.
Yeah, these are not, they have a relationship, but they are not exactly the same. Like I think this memorable experience, they want to know what make you the experience stick with you and be really memorable or many years after that. So here is a little bit different. So it's like, if I recall, even if it's really ordinary experience and so on, then it's a remembered experience. I think it's a little bit different than these things that the literature say characterize an experience as memorable, but that has to be really emotional and things like this. And here we are more interested in what affects how customers remember their experiences. So there is some overlap, but they are different things. Yep. So moving on, the second question that we had asked, how does this customer journey partitioning then influence the remembered experience? And then here we start to integrate a little bit more with this experienced utility literature. So basically from the event segmentation literature, we know that these event boundaries help structure our memory, our long-term memory. So we do not look back and remember the entire process as it was lived. So I ask you now, as a short exercise, to try to remember the last conference you attended. What is it that you remember about that? So in my case, I remember that, for instance, I went to Frontiers, but I went to Amsterdam first. I have a pre-trip there. I had a meeting with my coworkers about project funding application. I danced with Jonas in one dinner, and I had a long lunch with my colleague Maria. So our memory remembers events, and these are not in any way in the order as they happened. So that's how we remember things from the past. And why this happened? Because when there is an event boundary, we tend to drop that from our memory, and this is encoded in our memory. Okay, this event happened, something ended, something new begins. But we are interested not how customers exactly remember events, but the customer experiences. So the affective, sensorial, cognitive reactions that they have within and throughout events. And then from this experience utility literature, they talk a lot that in one event, in something that is perceived as continuous, a specific beginning, a specific end, there are three things that customers tend to remember or tend to disproportionately influence how people remember their experiences, that are the peaks of an experience, or the downs, can be negative as well, the end of an experience, the final moments, and the trend of that experience. So from this, we have a proposition that customers rely on peaks, ends, and trends of lived experiences to form the remembered experience of an event. And please, I want to call your attention that here I'm talking within one event. So I'm not talking about the whole customer journey on the entire customer journey. And why is that? Because this literature, they also say that when people are remembering things that are perceived as non-continuous, as divided, as segmented, they do not use those peaks and ends and trends anymore. So instead, they will average. So if you look at this figure, there are some partitions here in the customer journey, some lived experiences. So in one event, they will consider peaks, ends, and trends within that. Then in another event, peaks, trends, events within that, and so on and so on. But when they are remembering their customer journey, they tend to average the experiences in these events. So we propose that customers average remembered experiences of events to form the remembered experience of the customer journey. And one thing here that we find interesting is that usually, like in customer experience literature, we tend to readily apply this peak end trend to the entire customer journey. But these studies usually have relied on really short events. So these are not readily applicable. I see a raised hand.
Yes, I am sorry, dear Larissa, to interrupt you, but this is so interesting. I love the presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Can we go back to the previous proposition, P3A?
Yeah.
So over here, and I'm sorry to interrupt, just not to forget, because the whole presentation is so nice. You say that customers here rely on peaks, ends, and trends of lived experiences to form the remembered experience of an event. But if I'm not mistaken, and please correct me if I'm silly here, this is how memory works, right? In order to be able to remember an event.
Yeah.
So could we expect a different, result out of this proposition? Or is this just how the memory works?
I'm not sure I understand your question.
I'm sorry, I'll be more direct. This seems to me like a self-evident proposition, because that's how memory works, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So it is expected to be confirmed. What would be the alternative if it's not confirmed? That's the question.
Well, I think keeping that we want to contribute to customer experience literature here, this is really, as you said, it is expected to be confirmed. It's highly studied, and I don't like to use the word proved, but it has been confirmed over and over again, these effects. But what I think is the novelty of our research is this part, because in customer experience research, they tend to apply this peak end rule to the entire customer journey. So it's the end of the customer journey or a peak in the customer journey. And we are saying that no, when it's an extended process, we don't rely on peaks, ends, and trends anymore. So it's more the average. Yeah. So I agree that this is not very new.
No. But no, I get the idea now. It led to the next one, and I'm sorry I was hasty. I should have waited for the end. I apologize for that. And now it makes perfect sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, but these are the questions that we get from reviewers as well. There's you're just copy and pasting things from psychology. Yeah, but it's good that, because it's sometimes also difficult to explain the novelty But I believe it is in this differentiation, and really, when we think about customer journey that is perceived as having these separations, this does not apply anymore.
Fantastic, fantastic. Thanks so much. It's really interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah. Any more questions before I move to the third and the management part? Yes, I see hand.
Yeah, Larissa, thanks for the presentation so far. My question is, this process, is it applicable in all situations or in certain service sectors? I don't know the background of those who participated in the research and the market sector it may have focused. So is it assumed that in all sectors, or for instance, maybe certain public service, as me, if I were to use it for NHS or for HSBC, will it work same way? Or there are certain sectors these findings are more applicable?
Yeah, this is, there is a part now in the next question that I talk about different types of services and what one needs to consider. So I can maybe move on to that and then get back to your question and see if it's answered or not.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, yeah, but thanks. Yeah, so because the third question is, how can organizations use customer journey partitioning and their journey design in a way that positively influences the remembered experience? So we have that within events, these peaks, trends, and some influence the remembered experience. Then we are considering, okay, if we take all of this knowledge, what can actually organizations do with that? Because it's a lot in the customer's minds and a perception. Can they influence that? And we say yes. So our first part is concerned with how and when to insert these changes or interruptions in the customer journey, because the event segmentation literature talks about we can kind of trigger an event boundary. So for example, here you see a peak, then a good way or a good place to insert a distinctive change. That's how event boundaries are triggered, would be right after the peak. And that event then would be likely perceived more positively. So we have a proposition about that organizations should design distinctive changes in the customer journey. So this is the how, after intense positive peaks in the customer journey. So they can try to design that. In that way, that event will be remembered highly positively. But then if you look the other event here, that would not look so good. The second one after the interruption, because there is a negative trend, a negative ending, basically no peak. So that would be perceived as highly negative, I'm sorry. And then by looking at the literature and customer experience literature, we find a second way through which then we can influence this remembered experience, that is through managing stimuli in the customer journey. So we know that we cannot manage the responses. We can only manage the stimuli in a way to try to trigger some more positive responses. So another way of managing or using this customer journey partitioning, lived and remembered experience, is that organizations should design stimuli to trigger intense positive peaks, ends, and positive trends within events. So we can try to more purposefully try to trigger the right sequence of experiences in events. And here maybe it goes back to your question that we are thinking even further, is this applicable to all? Are there boundary conditions and things like this? And we have reviewed a lot the literature to find those. When we find two let's say, dimensions that are really important to consider when, like, okay, do I focus on the peak or do I focus on the end, and what is the time frame of the event, and so on. One of these dimensions is time of retrieval. So when is it important that the customer remembers the experience, or more relevant that the customer remembers the experience? So for example, if you are an Airbnb host, you probably have really different customers that some come back, but what is really important is maybe the review they leave after, immediately they leave the Airbnb. So then this early retrieval of the experience is really important in that case. But other kinds of organizations and services, they might have that same customers coming back and like making a decision a month later, years later, and so on. So then a late retrieval of the remembered experience is really important, that I try to optimize that. And why is this different? Because if customers remember something early or immediate after, they tend to remember really specific fine-grained events. So they divide the customer journey like more in fine grain, and they did remember these more fine-grained events. But the more time passes, these events kind of try to be like mushed together, and something that was very specific goes in the middle of the other. So we tend to remember larger events. And then we have the nature of the customer journey. That's another thing that influences that. So we have goal-oriented journeys. And goal-oriented journeys, some studies say that the end is disproportionately more important than the peak, for example, because it represents the outcome. So it has a meaning, the end. In that case, like the end of each event is a step closer of completing something. And then we have, on the other hand, experience-centric services, where we get the meaning from the process itself. So there are several studies that show that the peaks within events are really important, or that firms tend to design this experiential roller coaster. There are other words that they use, but then the peaks within events become quite important in that. When you consider these two dimensions, then there are specific guidelines of how to use this knowledge then to influence this customer journey design. So for example, if it's an experience-centric service where customers will remember really fine-grained events, then the focus should be in designing the stimuli to trigger these intense positive peaks within these fine events, and focus on design stimuli, for example, to avoid really flat experiences without variation, for example. Yeah, so I'm not going to go through each of them, but there are some recommendations that are more tailored for some type of firms and services than others. And then when it comes to, for instance, public organizations or different types of organizations like these, we haven't given much thought about that, but I assume because this is based on human perception and human memory, that this process would apply even to different types of organizations. I don't know if that answers your question now. Okay, maybe move on. Yeah, and then from all of that, we try to derive this conceptual framework that tries to explain that customers perceive event boundaries within, between, across touch points when they encounter these distinctive changes. This lived sequence of lived experiences within and across events influence how customers remember it, and then organizations can design distinctive changes and stimuli in the customer journey to try to trigger these sequences of experiences or place these event boundaries in the right places. considering then the nature of the customer journey and time of retrieval. So this tries to summarize what we have proposed here. And with this work, we are trying to contribute to the customer experience literature. So as I said in the beginning, we often tend to divide these customer journeys in stages that we decided ourselves. But now this work tries to, okay, how do customers perceive these divisions in the customer journey? So we believe this is a little bit more customer-centric conceptualization of customer journey partitioning. We also describe how this customer journey partitioning influences the remembered experience. And we like to emphasize that this peak, end, and trend, they do not apply very readily to the entire customer journey, but we give more nuance of how customers remember these extended processes. We also try to offer these two new facets to be considered in customer journey design, that this literature has talked, for instance, about thematic consistency of touch points and things like this. But we have designing, for example, these distinctive changes. And we find interesting as well that this kind of contradicts some assumptions in the literature, even though there are some studies already in this direction. But we usually tend to say a smooth journey is the best one, where without interruption. But here we say that maybe interrupt your customer, and like a break in the customer journey might be positive for how they remember the experience. And then we propose these boundary conditions that generate these specific recommendations as well for different organizations. Yeah, so that's what I had for today, and I'm looking forward to discuss this more.
Thank you, Larissa. Very interesting presentation. So any question? I would suggest just raise your hand and use the microphone, and there is a conflict. I will try to moderate, but let's keep it informal. And
I'm reading the comments now.
Okay, I will take a question. Larissa, thank you so much for your very interesting presentation. I really think there are many concepts that are really useful, but I was thinking about collaborative economy and the actors and the blurring roles of actors. This is only for customers, but we should also think about all the actors that are not exactly customers, and maybe we should analyze, maybe you will do it in the future, or would it be the same? And have you thought about it?
I have not thought about it, if this would apply to different customers or different users, or like you mean the providers of the service in this collaborative economy?
Because there is we couldn't say that there is not exactly a customer, but all the actors share this position. So it would be different in some way, that the customer experience in a collaborative context. Like, for example, I work a lot in crowdfunding context, and it's not clear that the actor is a consumer, but also could be a provider, could also, and resources are exchanged in a different way.
Yeah, I would assume it's not different, because this
it's not.
Yeah, because these theories are based on like human perception, so it should apply to any human. Maybe what be more different is that there are way less control in the customer journey in this managing part than it's like managing also many stimuli that are outside a platform's control, for example. So I would assume that would be very different, more like the managing part, but the perception part, I don't think it would. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, because thank you.
Thank you.
Just to let you know that Maria Jose is connecting from the University of Malaga. So if you're going to make any of your questions, I would suggest just briefly say where you're from, where your affiliation, so we can know each other better. Thank you. Rajab?
Hi, Jose. Thank you, Larissa. I'm Rajab Gandour. I'm from University of Liverpool, John Moores, senior lecturer in digital marketing, business analytics, and business intelligence. Very interesting topic with respect to marketing segmentation based on events. And this is basically the overall perspective, so we can differentiate it a little bit from the traditional market segmentation, where mainly most of the marketing approach and direction currently takes place in the industry. What is quite interesting with the finding of dividing the perspective of goal-oriented and experience-centric. Now, my question is, have you considered, or part of the study, was it involved any type of technology? For example, nowadays, there's a lot of direction towards what we call it the mixed reality experience, such as talking about VR perception, AR perception, and metaverse perspective. Now, what about the AI tools that can be embedded within the digital customer journey as a footprint? Does that play another role in terms of events segmentation, whether it's goal-oriented or customer or experience-centered? Because I believe at this stage, absolutely right, separating goal from customer-centered. But I believe towards the future and with the respect of technology, they could be all aligned together as a single perspective. Just want to know what your thoughts about that, Larissa.
Yeah, well, the way I see, like, technology can be used as a stimuli to trigger experience as well. So for example, AR, VR, they're really stimuli that will trigger these experiences. So in that way, it wouldn't change so much, but also to highlight that these are separated here more for analytical purposes, but usually they can be right in the middle, for example, or be neither. But yeah, these are like exaggerated divisions that are not exactly of the reality, but just to make sense of it. Yeah. But thank you.
Yeah, actually, that's just one point on that, Larissa, in terms of separating them. And this is the latest approach by Google. When they implemented Google Analytics, they actually moved from the traditional Google perspective analytics of separating the customer visits into combining them to events rather than separate visits. And they left the analytics perspective to the businesses to segment these events according to what they want, whether it's goal-oriented or whether it's customer journey. Thank you, Larissa, for that presentation. Very helpful.
Thank you.
Roshan?
Thank you, Jose. Thank you, Larissa, for your great presentation, and great into Hanken as well. I was there in 2015, one of the international colloquium on relationship marketing, and I'm fortunate to meet Professor Grunos and Joanna as well. I hope you well know. Yeah. So my question is about your methodology rather than the content of your findings. Have you conducted any kind of systematic literature review to know about those gaps that you enable to capture the whole lot of the knowledge? Did you, or you haven't done so, or any requirement to do it on your end in the future?
Well, that was also something reviewers have asked, but in this case, I don't think maybe it's the most appropriate method for this paper, because we really are trying to conceptualize, and there are so like different fields of literature. So yeah, we are making use of theories, but we don't really need to make a systematic literature review of this series to do that. So I don't think that for this purpose, systematic literature review would be the best method.
Right, okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Matthew, please.
Thank you for the very nice presentation. I've been a fan of your reading, your articles over the years. I'm a PhD student at Tokyo Institute of Technology, but I'm an Australian, half Japanese, but no longer Japanese. Sorry, I don't diverting a little bit too much there, but the question I had was, so I understand it's from a customer perspective, and I think that's a great way of looking at it. I think a lot of the most of the speech I kind of understood. The key part that I didn't quite understand was partitioning it as events. It seems like a very firm orientated perspective. Like we have a search phase, we have you know, a selection phase or post usage phase. We attribute these labels probably because the touch points themselves lead us to go, oh, that person just finalized the payment or whatever, right? So, but then we're talking about this from the customer's perspective. So where exactly do we draw the event boundaries? Because how do the customers even perceive something as an event? And if so, I would presume that different customers have different ways of perceiving what an event is. So that kind of was a bit paradoxical for me, because on one side you're really pushing this customer perspective, but on the other side there is no clear definite boundary for what is a customer perceived event. Did you have any thoughts around that to kind of
actually, if there were no boundaries whatsoever and each customer would perceive a different boundary of events, that would be quite useless, because we cannot map this journey for even each customer. But this event segmentation literature shows that people tend to agree where the event boundaries are. So yeah, this is not from the firm perspective. So if it is from the customers, they perceive events and they tend to agree where these event boundaries are. So that makes it a bit more manageable. And then there was something else I'd like to say, but it's kind of leaving my mind now. I'm sorry, can you repeat the other part of the question?
I think that's pretty much it. But I suppose the part that I'm still not sure about is, say, if we're going to put these propositions into more of a hypothesis and try to test it, like where do we actually draw the boundaries? Because do we ask them based on the remembered experience, and then what they then say is something that's I suppose an open-ended question, which could be qualitative or it could be structured, but it's still not clear to me how you would define a boundary, because
we wouldn't. The customer
Yeah.
would. So there are several ways that you can identify how customers do that. So for example, in this literature, they have followed the customer through the journey and asked them, okay, say, when do you perceive something to end? Or click on this bar when something begins and something ends, where you perceive events. Or please retell your customer journey, and then we'll talk about events. So there are ways to identify that. But you're right that how to transform this in experiment, I would be cautious of, for example, manipulated event without having this customer's perspective first, because we are advocating to understanding from the customer's perspective.
Yeah, I think I get it. Yeah, for me, I would have thought it was more like that intensity of the event itself. So it's more that emotional response, like immediate, non-deliberate, spontaneous kind of responses and reactions. So that would be more of a psychological thing rather than an event-based thing. So yeah, it was very interesting to hear your chat today, and thank you for responding to my questions.
Thank you.
Mohsin?
Yes, my name is Mohsin. I am a PhD student at Oulu Business School in Finland. And Larissa, thank you so much for your insightful presentation. I just had one question or concern, maybe some idea about when you say about the lived experience, the balance of lived experience. So I was looking at that picture, the framework that you were trying to actually conceptualize. So here, when you say lived experience, is more towards than angle of phenomenological perspective. So I was thinking, like, have you considered some sort of that thinking or underlying mechanism that support your the thinking that you have already here in
in this paper we are using lived experience as synonymous to customer experience, but then when we are looking more like this, like we see that in customer experience literature, we do not differentiate between the customer experience. And the way I define is spontaneous responses and reactions that are happening throughout the customer journey in that moment. And then if you ask with a scale later, please rate your experience using this customer experience scale. To me, that's not customer experience anymore, but the remembered experience, which will be different than what has been lived according to this literature. So in this paper, I don't think I go into phenomenology because it's really focused on cognitive theories and things like this. So yeah, I don't know how to use it in this paper, but probably it is the same when we are talking about lived experience. But what I want to highlight is that it's in real time as they're happening. This is the lived experience.
Yes, thank you. And then another question regarding the segmentation that you are bringing up by event. So earlier it is now, for example, traditionally pre, during, and post. So how it is going to be different, for example, in your work?
We would have to ask the customers. They probably would, divide in this traditional, but the events, when we talk about events in this literature, it's really small things. It's like from seconds to few minutes, for example. But of course, when we look way back, then we think of broader events. But if you look immediately after, it's like really small events that we're looking at, even within touch points. So that would be, I think, the different aspect here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other question or comment? I would like Larissa ask you is, well, congratulations. I found very inspiring all the model and the taxonomy. How do you think it can help from a customer experience management, from firm perspective? They're trying to manage, if we assume that it is possible to manage the customer experience anyway. How do you think can be your best contribution from your model to customer experience management?
Yeah, so in that case, I believe it is customer journey design. So really very purposefully designing some interruptions and breaks in the customer journey, for example, and not only trying to provide the best experience ever in every touch point and in every stage of the touch point, but if we follow these findings, these studies of experience utility, an experience that starts average within an event, for example, and ends in a high note would be better perceived than experience that is like the same mean, but a little bit over average throughout that event. So this temporal perspective of how to design the stimuli to try to purposely trigger a certain sequence, I think these findings can be used in that. And that I see in customer journey design, at least. I don't know if that makes sense to you.
Very interesting. Thank you very much. Good. So do we have any final comment or question?
I didn't get the chance to read the comments.
There was a final comment from Frederic. He's from University Internacional in Catalonia in Barcelona. He mentioned that he's working on a paper and with he read your paper with Elena Jacola. He wanted to contact with you, but he had to leave. Janice, you have a comment or question?
Yeah. Just a final comment / question. Inspired by the great work and the final proposition 5A, if I'm not mistaken, on examples and comments and examples and practical, practicalities of this research framework. How do you plan to take it forward, dear Larissa? How do you plan to take forward this research so as to be able to follow? Actually, it looks very interesting to me.
Well, it's already in review, and we don't have now any plans to take forward. But I have a sketch, for instance, what would it take to try to test this empirically. And that would be quite complicated because it's like have to be able to follow someone in a journey, then perceive event boundaries and capture the experience real time. So are 3 elements that are quite complicated, but I do hope that the literature kind of moves to that. And I see already many advancements in actually following customers to the market with some wearable devices to measure the arousal, for example. So I think it's possible. Unfortunately, I do not have the resources to conduct such type of research, but I would assume, I can see the pieces that would require.
Yeah. Fantastic. I would love to see it coming into reality, testing those propositions.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. Fantastic. Thank you so much. It was very interesting.
Thank you.
Thanks, Yannis. So thank everyone for participating today, and of course for Marissa for your availability of time and sharing with us your research. We will do an editing of this video recording. We will post on the YouTube channel that we have in the Services and Customer Experience group. And from there, we will keep our collaborations and sharing our experience, conferences, papers, etc. So we need to help each other and to stimulate with this kind of academic discussion. Okay, thank you so much.
I would like to thank you everyone for the comments and questions. I think they help us, and this paper was in review, as I said, and it was major and risky, so who knows the next round. Wow. But if luckily goes ahead, then I will definitely take this into account, or maybe in another journal. Yeah.
And good luck with the paper.